Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council. Around her, representatives from 200 alien species filled the massive chamber. Some floated in anti-gravity pods. Others sat on platforms designed for their strange bodies. The hall was built to show the power of the galaxy's oldest civilizations. Its walls stretched up for hundreds of meters, covered in gold and precious stones from 1,000 worlds. Elena had been humanity's voice in this place for 7 years. She had learned to speak carefully. She had learned to smile when aliens insulted her species. She had learned that humans were considered young and weak in a galaxy ruled by ancient powers. But today, something was wrong. Her communication device buzzed against her wrist. She looked down and saw an emergency message from Earth. The words on the screen made no sense at first. She read them again, then again. Her hands began to shake. Velthari attack. 2.3 billion dead. No survivors. The council session continued around her. Aliens argued about trade routes and mining rights. They did not know. They did not care. And somewhere across the galaxy, an entire world of human beings had just died. Terra Nova was humanity's largest colony. It was a beautiful world of blue oceans and green forests. Families had built homes there. Children had played in its parks. Scientists had studied its strange animals. Artists had painted its purple sunsets. 2,300,000,000 people had called it home. Now they were all dead. Elena's legs felt weak. She grabbed the edge of her platform to stay standing. More messages came through, reports from rescue ships that found nothing but ash. Images of a planet turned to black glass. The Velthari had used something called ashfall, a weapon so terrible that the Council had banned it centuries ago. The Velthari were one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. They were tall creatures with gray skin and 4 arms. They had been conquering worlds for 10,000 years before humans learned to make fire. They sat on the High Council and helped make the laws that governed all species. And they had just murdered 2 billion human beings. Elena looked across the chamber at the Velthari delegation. High Marshal Kethfor sat in his chair like a king on a throne. He was watching her. When their eyes met, he smiled. It was a cold smile, full of pride and cruelty. He knew what he had done. He was proud of it. The council session ended, and Elena requested an emergency meeting. Word spread quickly through the chamber. By the time the High Council gathered, every species knew what had happened. Some looked at Elena with something like pity. Most looked at her with nothing at all. High Counselor Morath, a being made of living crystal, called the session to order. His voice rang through the chamber like bells. We have received reports of an incident in human space. High Marshal Kethfor, please explain. Kethfor rose from his seat. He was over 3 meters tall, and his gray skin was covered with ritual scars. There is nothing to explain, he said. His voice was deep and calm. Humanity has been expanding into space that borders Velthari territory. We warned them many times to stop. They did not listen. We were forced to defend our borders. Elena stepped forward. Defend your borders? Terra Nova was 15 light-years from your nearest colony. It was a civilian world. There were no military bases. There were no weapons. There were children. There were families. And you burned them all. They were in our path, Kethfor said simply. Humanity grows too fast. You spread like insects across the stars. We showed you what happens to insects that come too close to Velthari fire. Elena felt rage building in her chest. You used ashfall. The council banned that weapon. You broke your own laws. Kethfor shrugged his 4 shoulders. The ban applies to use against council members. Humanity is not a full member. You are observers, guests. You have no protection under our laws. The chamber was silent. Elena looked around at the alien faces. Some would not meet her eyes. Others watched with cold interest, like scientists observing an experiment. None of them spoke in her defense. High Counselor Morath made a sound like wind chimes. This is a difficult situation. The Velthari have technically not broken any laws. However, we recognize that humanity has suffered a great loss. The Council will offer reparations. Reparations? Elena's voice cracked. We will grant humanity 3 uninhabited moons in the outer territories. We will also provide a formal apology from the Velthari Dominion. Elena stared at the crystal being. 3 moons. For 2 billion lives. It is a generous offer, said a representative from another species. Most young races receive nothing when they anger their elders. Generous? Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think 3 rocks in space are generous payment for genocide? Kethvor stepped closer to her. He towered over her small human form. Be careful, little ambassador. Your species lives because we allow it. Accept the Council's gift and be grateful. Or perhaps humanity needs another lesson. Elena looked up at him. She was small and soft, a creature of flesh and blood, standing before a warrior who had conquered worlds. But something changed in her eyes. The fear left them. Something else took its place. Something old and cold and patient. I see, she said quietly. I understand now. She turned to face the full council. Her voice was steady and clear. For 7 years, I have stood in this chamber. I have listened to your wisdom. I have followed your rules. I believed that the Galactic Council stood for justice. I believed that the strong protected the weak. I believed that civilization meant something. She paused and looked at each member of the High Council in turn. I was wrong. This council protects only the powerful. It makes laws that punish the weak and excuse the strong. When the Velthari murdered 2 billion innocent people, you offered us moons. When they used a banned weapon on civilians, you called it a border dispute. High Counselor Morath shifted uncomfortably. Ambassador Vasquez, please understand our position. The Council must maintain peace between member species. We cannot start a war over what? Elena interrupted. Over the lives of humans? Our lives mean nothing to you. We are insects to you. Pests. Animals that have learned to talk. You are being emotional, Kethvor said with contempt. This is why your species is unfit for the stars. You cannot control your feelings. Elena smiled. It was the same kind of smile Kethvor had given her earlier. Cold, patient, dangerous. You are right, she said. I am emotional. I feel things deeply. I feel love for my people. I feel grief for the dead. And I feel something else now. Something you have never seen from humans before. She pulled out her communication device and sent a single message to Earth. 5 words that would change the galaxy forever. What did you just send? Kethvor demanded. Elena put the device away. A message to my government. They have made their choice. Now we make ours. What choice? What are you talking about? Elena turned and walked toward the chamber door. Every alien in the room watched her small figure cross the great hall. At the door, she stopped and looked back one final time. You have taught us something valuable today, she said. You have shown us what the galaxy truly is. It is not a place of law and justice. It is a place where the strong do what they want and the weak suffer. You have made it very clear that humanity is weak. She opened the door. Enjoy that feeling while it lasts. Then she was gone. The chamber erupted in conversation. Aliens turned to each other with confusion and amusement. Who did this little human think she was? What could her primitive species possibly do against the might of the Velthari? Against the power of the Council itself? Kethvor laughed loudly. Let them cry and rage. In a year they will come crawling back, begging for those 3 moons. Humans are prey animals. It is in their nature to submit. Ambassador Lyrian of the Aelori, A species as old as the stars themselves, spoke from her place in the shadows. Her people had watched civilizations rise and fall for millions of years. They rarely spoke in council sessions. "You are making a mistake," she said softly. Kefvor turned to her with annoyance. "What mistake? The humans will do nothing." Lyrian's ancient eyes studied him with something like pity. "You do not understand them. You see a small species and think they are weak. You see their emotions and think they are foolish. But I have studied humans since they first reached the stars. I have seen things in them that you have not." "And what is that?" Lyrian was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "Humans do not surrender. They do not forget. And when they are hurt badly enough, they become something else entirely. Something that even the Velthari should fear." Kefvor dismissed her words with a wave of his four hands. "Nonsense. They are mammals who evolved from prey. They will break like all the others." Lyrian said nothing more, but as she watched Kefvor celebrate his victory, she felt something she had not felt in centuries. Fear. Far across the galaxy, Elena's message reached Earth. It was received by the President, the generals, the leaders of every human colony. 5 words that carried the weight of 2 billion dead. The message read, "They have chosen war." And in offices and military bases across human space, people who had spent their lives hoping for peace began to plan something else entirely. They looked at pictures of Terra Nova, that beautiful world now turned to ash. They looked at images of the children who had died, the families who had burned, the future that had been stolen. And they began to remember. 6 months passed after the destruction of Terra Nova. The galaxy moved on quickly. There were trade deals to make, territories to claim, and ancient rivalries to continue. The death of 2 billion humans became just another story. Something aliens mentioned when they wanted to warn young species about the dangers of growing too fast. The Velthari celebrated their victory. Kefvor was rewarded with a permanent seat on the High Council. Songs were written about his great triumph over the human pests. Young Velthari warriors studied the attack on Terra Nova as an example of perfect military strategy. It became known as the Cleansing, and it was taught with pride in their military schools. Meanwhile, humanity went silent. The day after Elena Vasquez walked out of the council chamber, every human ambassador left their posts. Human trade ships stopped arriving at alien ports. Communication channels went dark. The borders of human space closed completely. Ships that tried to enter were turned away without explanation. At first, the council was curious. They sent diplomatic messages asking what was happening. The messages went unanswered. They sent ships to investigate. The ships found human border patrols that would not speak, would not negotiate, would only point their weapons and wait. After 3 months, curiosity turned to amusement. The powerful species of the galaxy began to laugh at humanity's response to their great tragedy. They had run away. They had hidden in their little corner of space like frightened children. The mighty humans, who had spread so quickly across the stars, had finally learned their place. Kefvor spoke about it often in council sessions. "You see," he would say with satisfaction, "this is what happens when you show strength to weak species. They submit, they crawl into their holes and lick their wounds. Humanity will never threaten anyone again." They had seen this pattern before with young species. A powerful civilization would hurt them, and they would either fight and die or hide and fade away. Humanity had chosen to hide. In a few centuries, they would be forgotten entirely. Only Ambassador Lyrian of the Aelori refused to join the laughter. She continued to watch the borders of human space with growing concern. Her people had instruments that could see things other species could not, and what she saw worried her deeply. "You misread them," she said during one council session. "Humans do not retreat. They prepare. Kethvor waved away her warning. Prepare for what? They have nothing. Their technology is primitive. Their military is small. Even if they built ships for 100 years, they could not match Velthari's strength. Lyrian shook her ancient head. You do not understand what you have awakened. But no one listened to her. The galaxy was too busy enjoying peace and profit to worry about a silent species hiding at the edge of known space. Inside human territory, something unprecedented was happening. The message Elena Vasquez had sent, "They have chosen war," reached every human leader within hours of Terra Nova's destruction. Within days, the United Terran Federation called an emergency assembly. Representatives from every colony, every station, every ship gathered to make a decision that would define humanity's future. The debate was short. The vote was unanimous. President Sarah Chen stood before the assembly and spoke words that had not been spoken in human history. I invoke Protocol Prometheus. From this moment forward, every resource of the Terran Federation is dedicated to a single purpose. We will build, we will prepare, and when we are ready, we will answer the murder of our people. Protocol Prometheus was created centuries ago, when humans first realized they were not alone in the universe. It was a plan for total war, a complete transformation of human society into a military machine. No one ever thought it would be used. No one wanted it to be used. But Terra Nova changed everything. Across human space, the transformation began immediately. Factories that made civilian goods switched to producing weapons and ship parts. Scientists who studied peaceful technologies were reassigned to military research. Schools added combat training to their programs. Children grew up learning not just reading and math, but also tactics and strategy. The economy changed completely. Credits and profits no longer mattered. The only currency was contribution to the war effort. Engineers who designed better engines were heroes. Workers who built ships faster were celebrated. Everyone had a role to play, and everyone played it. Admiral Marcus Cole was put in charge of the military buildup. He was an old soldier who had spent his career hoping for peace. Now he spent every waking moment planning for war. His office was covered with maps of Velthari space, reports on their military strength, and designs for new weapons. We have 2 years, he told his staff during their first meeting. Maybe 3 if we're lucky. The council thinks we're hiding. They think we're weak. That belief is our greatest weapon. We must use it. The admirals and generals who served under him nodded. They understood. They had all lost people on Terra Nova. Friends, family, loved ones turned to ash by Velthari fire. Their grief had become fuel, and that fuel would burn for as long as it took. Cole looked at the designs on his desk. New ships, new weapons, things that would make the galaxy tremble. We will not just match Velthari's strength, he said quietly. We will exceed it. We will build a force so powerful that the Council will never threaten humanity again. Is that possible? Asked one of his officers. The Velthari have been building their military for 10,000 years. We have decades at most. Cole smiled grimly. The Velthari build for glory. They build for tradition. They build the same ships their ancestors built because that is how it has always been done. We will build for one purpose only, victory. We will use every trick, every innovation, every idea that the galaxy considers too dangerous or too strange. The Velthari think they are warriors. We will show them what war really is. Deep in secret facilities, human scientists worked on projects that would have terrified the Council. They developed weapons that bent gravity itself, crushing ships like paper. They created missiles guided by artificial intelligence, swarms of tiny killers that could think and adapt. They built engines that moved faster than anything the galaxy had seen. Some scientists worried about the morality of their work. They were building tools of death on a scale humanity had never imagined. One researcher asked Admiral Cole if they were becoming monsters. Cole's answer was simple. The monsters killed our children. We are building the weapons to stop them from ever doing it again. There is no morality in letting evil win because we were too afraid to fight. The secret work continued. In shipyards hidden from alien eyes, new vessels took shape. They were not like the graceful ceremonial ships that other species built. Human warships were brutal and efficient, designed for one purpose only. Their hulls were painted black, with no decoration except a single marking, the coordinates of Terra Nova. Every ship carried the memory of the dead. The first of these new dreadnoughts was named the TNS Remembrance. He stood on its bridge as it completed its first test flight, watching stars streak past the windows. 2 billion people, he said to himself. You are not forgotten. You will never be forgotten. His second-in-command approached him with reports. Sir, our intelligence says the Council still believes we're hiding. They think we'll ask for peace soon. Cole nodded. Good, let them think that. Every day they spend laughing at us is another day we spend building. When we finally move, I want them to realize their mistake only when it's too late. And when will that be, sir? Cole turned to look at his officer. His eyes were hard and cold, but there was no hatred in them, only determination, only patience, only the certainty of a man who had dedicated everything to a single goal. When we're ready, not a day before, not a day after, we will have one chance to do this right. One chance to make them answer for what they did. I will not waste it. The officer saluted and left. Cole returned to watching the stars. Somewhere out there, the Velthori were sleeping peacefully. They believed they had nothing to fear from the silent humans. They believed they had broken humanity's spirit forever. They were wrong. Months turned into years. The shipyards worked day and night. The armies trained endlessly. The scientists made breakthrough after breakthrough. And slowly, quietly, humanity transformed from a young species trying to find its place in the galaxy into something else entirely. Ambassador Lyrian of the Alori watched from her distant world. Her instruments showed her things that would have terrified the Council if they had bothered to look. Human space was glowing with energy. Their shipyards were producing vessels at impossible rates. Their military had grown from a small defense force into something that dwarfed even the Velthari Dominion. She sent warnings to the Council. They ignored her. She sent warnings to the Velthari. They laughed at her. She even tried to send a message to the humans themselves, begging them to seek peace. The message was returned with 3 words. Too late now. On the 2nd anniversary of Terra Nova's destruction, Admiral Cole addressed his fleet. 10,000 ships hung in formation around the Remembrance, their black hulls blocking out the stars. Each ship was crewed by humans who had spent 2 years preparing for this moment. Each ship carried weapons that the galaxy had never seen. Cole's voice reached every crew member, every soldier, every pilot in the fleet. 2 years ago we lost everything, he said. 2 years ago, the galaxy showed us exactly what it thought of human life. 2 years ago, we made a promise to our dead that we would answer their murder with justice. He paused, looking at the fleet around him. So many ships, so many people, so much power, all focused on a single purpose. Today we keep that promise. Today we emerge from silence. Today the Velthari learn what happens when they harm humanity. The fleet began to move, thousands of engines burning bright against the darkness. They thought our silence meant surrender, Cole continued. They thought we were broken. They were wrong. Our silence was preparation. Our grief was fuel. Our patience was strategy. He gave the final order. All ships set course for Velthari space. It's time to show the galaxy what humanity really is. Far away, in the halls of the Galactic Council, alarms suddenly began to sound. Sensors across the galaxy detected something impossible. A human fleet of over 10,000 ships emerging from their borders, moving faster than anything their size should be able to move. Kethvor received the report in his chambers. He read it 3 times, certain there was a mistake. The numbers were impossible. Humanity could not have built such a force in 2 years. It was not possible. But the sensors did not lie. The wolves had finally emerged from their den, and they were hungry. The first sign that something was wrong came from a Velthari patrol ship near the human border. The captain sent a routine report. A small group of human vessels had been spotted in the area. Nothing unusual. Human ships sometimes wandered close to the border, though they always turned back. Then the communication went dead. Velthari Command waited for the patrol to report again. Hours passed. Then days. They sent another ship to investigate. That ship also went silent. Then another. Then another. In the span of 2 weeks, 17 Velthari patrol ships disappeared. No distress signals, no wreckage, no explanation. Ships that had guarded the border for decades simply stopped existing. The Velthari military began to worry. They increased patrols along the human border. They sent their best ships with their most experienced captains, and still, ships kept vanishing. One patrol managed to send a partial message before going silent. The transmission was filled with static and fear. The captain's voice was shaking as he spoke. They came out of nowhere, so fast, we could not even track them. Our weapons did nothing. Our shields they just failed. There are hundreds of them. No, thousands. They are singing. The humans are singing as they... The message ended there. When Velthari intelligence analyzed the audio, they found something strange buried in the static. Human voices, hundreds of them, singing together. The song was old, something from ancient Earth, a funeral hymn, a song for the dead. High Marshal Kethvor received the report in his quarters on the Velthari homeworld. He read it with growing anger. 17 ships lost to human attacks? Impossible. Humans were weak. Their technology was primitive. This had to be some kind of trick or mistake. He ordered the border fleet to full alert and requested a meeting with the High Council. The council chamber was tense when Kethvor arrived. News of the missing ships had spread quickly, and other species were asking uncomfortable questions. The Velthari had spent 2 years boasting about how they had broken humanity. Now it seems humanity had other ideas. High Counselor Morath called the session to order. We have received disturbing reports from Velthari space. High Marshal Kethvor, please explain the situation. Kethvor stood tall, refusing to show any fear. A minor incident. Human raiders have been attacking our patrol ships. Cowardly hit-and-run tactics. We are dealing with it. Ambassador Lyrian of the Aelori spoke from her place in the shadows. Perhaps the council should see the latest intelligence reports. Before Kethvor could object, Lyrian activated the chamber's display systems. A massive holographic image appeared in the center of the room, showing the border between human and Velthari space. Red dots marked the positions of human ships. The chamber fell silent. There were not hundreds of ships. There were thousands. Over 10,000 vessels were moving in perfect formation toward Velthari territory. Their formation stretched across light years, a wall of black ships advancing like a wave of darkness. High Counselor Morath's crystal body flickered with distress. What is this? Where did these ships come from? Lyrian's ancient voice was heavy with sadness. I warned you. 2 years ago, I told this council that humans do not retreat. They prepare. You did not listen. You laughed and celebrated while humanity built the largest military force this galaxy has seen in 10,000 years. Kethvor stared at the display with growing horror. This is impossible. They cannot have built so many ships in 2 years. Their technology is not advanced enough. Their technology was not advanced enough, Lyrian corrected him. It seems they have improved it significantly. Our sensors show weapons and engines that we have never seen before. Some of the designs appear to be based on technologies that this council banned millennia ago. The chamber erupted in worried conversation. Representatives from 100 species talked over each other, demanding answers, assigning blame, calling for action. The carefully maintained order of the Galactic Council was falling apart. High Counselor Morath raised his voice above the chaos. Silence! We must respond to this threat. High Marshal Kethvor, can the Velthari military defeat this human fleet? Kethvor hesitated. It was the first time anyone had ever seen him uncertain. Our forces are strong, he said slowly, but we would need to gather our full fleet. And even then, he did not need to. Then we must seek peace, Morath declared. The Council will send a diplomatic envoy to the humans. We will offer them whatever they want to stop this war before it begins. Kethvor's face twisted with rage. You would negotiate with prey? You would reward their aggression with diplomacy? I would prevent the destruction of the Velthari Dominion, Morath replied coldly. Your pride has already cost this galaxy enough. The Council voted quickly. A diplomatic ship was prepared, carrying representatives from the oldest and most respected species. They were given authority to offer humanity almost anything: territory, resources, technology, a seat on the High Council itself. Whatever it took to prevent war. The envoy reached the edge of human space 3 days later. They broadcast peaceful intentions on all frequencies and waited for a response. For hours, nothing happened. Then a single human ship appeared in front of them. It was small compared to the massive diplomatic vessel, but something about it made the alien ambassadors uneasy. It was painted solid black, with no markings except strange numbers on its hull. The numbers, they later learned, were the coordinates of Terra Nova. A communication channel opened. A human voice spoke, calm and cold. You have entered Terran Federation space. State your purpose. The lead ambassador, an ancient being from a species that had existed since before the stars were born, spoke carefully. We come on behalf of the Galactic Council. We seek peace with humanity. We wish to discuss terms that will prevent war and restore friendship between our peoples. There was a long silence. Then the human voice spoke again. Wait. Hours passed. The diplomatic ship waited, surrounded by darkness and silence. More human ships appeared, forming a loose ring around them. None of the ships spoke or moved. They simply waited, black shapes against the stars. Finally, a new voice came through the communication system. It was different from the first, older and harder. This is Admiral Marcus Cole of the Terran Federation Navy. You want to discuss peace? Yes, the ambassador said eagerly. The Council is prepared to offer humanity generous terms. Territory, resources, political power, whatever you need to heal the wounds of the past. The wounds of the past. Cole's voice was flat. You mean the murder of 2,300,000,000 people. You mean the burning of our largest colony. You mean the genocide that your council called a territorial misunderstanding and offered to fix with 3 empty moons. The ambassador shifted uncomfortably. That was a mistake. The council recognizes that now. We are prepared to do much more. Are you? Cole asked. Tell me, ambassador. In the 2 years since Terra Nova burned, has the council punished the Velthari for using a banned weapon? Have they faced any consequences at all? The ambassador was silent. In fact, Cole continued, High Marshal Kethvor was promoted to the High Council itself. He was rewarded for killing our children. Songs were written celebrating the cleansing. Velthari schools teach the destruction of Terra Nova as an example of great military strategy. These things can be changed, the ambassador said desperately. The Council is prepared to do whatever protects itself, Cole interrupted. 2 years ago, you could have done the right thing. You could have demanded justice for the dead. You could have shown humanity that the galaxy was fair and just. Instead, you offered us moons and told us to be grateful. Admiral Cole, please, we can still find peace. War will only bring more death, more suffering. Surely, humanity does not want that. There was another long silence. When Cole spoke again, his voice was quiet, but carried across the void like thunder. We do not want war, Ambassador. We never wanted war. We wanted to explore the stars. We wanted to learn from older civilizations. We wanted to find our place in the galaxy. But you taught us that there is no place for the weak. You taught us that justice means nothing without power. You taught us exactly what the galaxy truly is. Then let us start again, the ambassador pleaded. Let us build a new relationship between humanity and the Council. It is too late for that. Cole's words fell like stones. Your ships may return to Council space with our answer. You will deliver it to the High Council exactly as I give it to you. What answer? Cole's voice became cold and final. We do not negotiate. We do not forget. We do not forgive. Kethvor will answer for his crimes. The Velthari will answer for the cleansing. The Council will answer for sanctioning genocide. You had 2 years to deliver justice. Now we deliver ours. The communication channel closed. The diplomatic ship was escorted back to Council space by silent human vessels. The ambassadors did not speak during the journey. There was nothing to say. When they delivered Cole's message to the High Council, the chamber was silent for a long time. Representatives who had laughed at humanity 2 years ago now sat in shocked silence. The young species they had dismissed as insects was coming for them, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. High Marshal Kethvor rose from his seat. His face was hard with anger, but there was something else behind his eyes now. Something that might have been fear. Let them come, he declared loudly. The Velthari have conquered 1,000 species. We will add humanity to that list. They are still prey, no matter how many ships they build. Lyrian of the Allori shook her ancient head slowly. You still do not understand. After everything, you still do not understand. Understand what? Lyrian looked at him with eyes that had watched civilizations rise and fall for millions of years. Humans are not prey, High Marshal. They never were. They are predators who learn to hide their teeth, and you have given them a reason to stop hiding. Before Kethvor could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the Council station. Sensors had detected the human fleet entering Velthari space. 10,000 ships, moving in perfect formation, their black hulls marked with the coordinates of the dead. The war had begun, and somewhere at the head of that great armada, Admiral Marcus Cole stood on the bridge of the TNS Remembrance, watching stars streak past the windows. Behind him, the largest military force humanity had ever assembled followed in perfect order. For Terra Nova, he said softly. Around him, his crew repeated the words. On every ship in the fleet, humans spoke the same phrase. It became a chant, then a prayer, then a battle cry. For Terra Nova, for Terra Nova, for Terra Nova. The wolves had come for their revenge, and nothing in the galaxy would stop them. The war between humanity and the Velthari Dominion lasted 11 days. In those 11 days, 10,000 years of Velthari military dominance came to an end. The Velthari had expected a long war. They had conquered species before and knew that wars between starfaring civilizations took years or even decades. They planned to use their experience and their fortified positions to wear down the human fleet over time. They believed that eventually humanity would tire of fighting and accept peace on Velthari terms. They were wrong about everything. The first 3 days of the war destroyed every assumption the Velthari had ever made about military combat. Human ships did not fight the way other species fought. They did not form battle lines. They did not exchange fire from a distance. They did not follow any of the rules that had governed galactic warfare for millennia. Instead, the human fleet moved like water, flowing around Velthari defenses and striking from unexpected angles. Their ships were faster than anything the Velthari had ever seen. Their weapons were strange and terrifying, missiles that seemed to think for themselves, changing course mid-flight to find weak points in Velthari armor, beams that bent gravity, crushing ships into twisted metal, devices that made Velthari shields simply stop working. Admiral Cole commanded the assault from the bridge of the TNS Remembrance. He had spent 2 years planning every detail of this campaign. He knew the position of every Velthari military base. He knew the patrol routes of every Velthari fleet. He knew their tactics, their weaknesses, their blind spots, and he used that knowledge without mercy. On the first day, human forces struck 12 Velthari military stations simultaneously. The attacks came without warning, without demands for surrender, without any communication at all. One moment, the stations were operating normally. The next moment, they were gone. The Velthari commanders sent distress calls that were never answered. They begged for reinforcements that never came. They died wondering how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. By the end of the third day, the entire Velthari border defense network had been destroyed. Humanity had not lost a single ship. The Velthari High Command gathered on the homeworld to plan their response. High Marshal Kethvor demanded an immediate counterattack. Other commanders urged caution. The arguments grew heated as reports continued to arrive, each one worse than the last. Finally, they agreed on a plan. The Velthari would gather their full battle fleet at the Korath Nebula, a strategic position deep in their territory. From there, they would launch a massive strike against the human forces. It was the same strategy that had won the Velthari 100 wars over 10,000 years. The fleet gathered over the next 4 days. 3,000 warships, the pride of the Velthari Dominion, assembled in perfect formation. Kethvor himself took command, standing on the bridge of his flagship with confidence. This was what the Velthari did best. This was how they had conquered the galaxy. "Let the humans come," he announced to his captains. "They will break against Velthari might, like waves against a mountain." The humans came, but they did not break. Admiral Cole received reports of the Velthari gathering and smiled for the first time since the war began. They were doing exactly what he had expected. They were fighting the same war they had always fought, using the same tactics that had always worked. They did not understand that this war was different. "All ships," he ordered, "proceed to the Korath Nebula. It's time to end this." The human fleet arrived at the nebula on the morning of the 8th day. The Velthari were waiting, their ships arranged in a classic defensive formation. Both fleets faced each other across the void, thousands of vessels ready for battle. Kethvor opened a communication channel. "Human Admiral, you have fought well, but this is where your war ends. Surrender now, and we may show mercy." Cole's response was calm. "The time for mercy was 2 years ago, High Marshal. You chose differently then, so do we." The battle began. The Velthari expected the humans to charge straight at them, the way other species always did. Instead, the human fleet split into dozens of smaller groups that moved in complex patterns around the Velthari formation. The Velthari tried to target them, but the human ships were too fast, too unpredictable. Then the human weapons began to fire. Swarms of tiny missiles erupted from human ships, thousands of them, each one guided by artificial intelligence that let it think and adapt. The swarms moved like living things, finding gaps in Velthari defenses, overwhelming point defense systems, slipping through shields that were never designed to stop so many small targets. Velthari ships began to explode. 1, then 10, then 100. Captains screamed for help on communication channels that were jammed by human electronic warfare. Shields failed without warning as human gravity weapons twisted space itself around Velthari vessels. Kethvor watched in horror as his fleet was torn apart. This was not war as he understood it. This was something else entirely. The humans were not fighting with honor or tradition. They were fighting to destroy, completely and utterly. "Fall back," he ordered. "All ships, retreat to secondary positions." But there was no retreat. Human ships were everywhere, surrounding the Velthari fleet, cutting off every escape route. The trap had been set 2 years ago, and Kethvor had walked right into it. The Battle of Korath Nebula lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 3,000 Velthari warships had been reduced to drifting wreckage. The human fleet had lost fewer than 200 vessels. Kethvor escaped with a handful of ships. He fled back to the Velthari homeworld, where he tried to organize a final defense. But there was nothing left to organize. The Velthari military had been broken. Their fleet was gone. Their soldiers were scattered. Their empire was falling apart. Over the next 2 days, human ground forces descended on Velthari colony worlds. But something strange happened that the galaxy did not expect. The humans did not burn those worlds. They did not use ashfall or any weapon like it. They occupied the colonies, removed military forces, and then simply waited. The Galactic Council demanded an explanation. Admiral Cole's response spread across every communication network in the galaxy. "We are not like them. The Velthari murdered billions of innocent people because they saw us as pests to be exterminated. We could do the same to them. We have the power, we have the weapons, we have every reason, but we are not fighting to destroy the Velthari. We are fighting to bring them to justice. There is a difference, and humanity has not forgotten it." On the 11th day, the human fleet arrived at Velthar Prime, the Velthari homeworld. 2 billion Velthari lived there, soldiers and civilians, families and children. The human fleet surrounded the planet, 10,000 ships blocking out the stars. High Counselor Morath appeared on emergency communication channels, his crystal body flickering with distress. "Admiral Cole, I beg you. The Velthari are defeated. Show mercy. Show that humanity is better than this." Cole stood on his bridge, looking down at the blue-green world below him. For a long moment, he said nothing. Every human in the fleet waited for his order. Every alien in the galaxy watched to see what would happen next. When Cole finally spoke, his voice was heavy with exhaustion and pain. "Mercy, High Counselor? You speak to us of mercy? Where was the Council's mercy when our children burned? Where were your sanctions, your peacekeepers, your justice? You taught us what the galaxy truly is, a place where power is the only law, a place where the weak suffer whatever the strong choose to inflict." He paused, his eyes fixed on the planet below. "We could burn Velthar Prime right now. We could turn it to glass, just like they turned Terra Nova. 2 billion Velthari would die, and the galaxy would say we were justified. They attacked us first. They killed our people. We would be within our rights." The communication channel was silent. Everyone waited. "But we will not," Cole continued. "Not because the Velthari deserve mercy. They do not. Not because burning their world is wrong. For what they did, it would be justice. We will not burn Velthar Prime because the people we lost on Terra Nova deserve better than to be avenged by monsters." He turned to face the screen, showing Counselor Morath's image. "We want justice, High Counselor, true justice, and we will have it." Cole announced humanity's terms. They were severe, but not cruel. Kethvor and the entire Velthari High Command would be surrendered to human custody for trial. The Velthari military would be dissolved and placed under human supervision. The Velthari Dominion itself would be restructured. Its aggressive expansion policies ended forever. And on Velthar Prime, a monument would be built. A wall of black stone listing the name of every human who died on Terra Nova. 2,300,000,000 names that the Velthari would see every day for the rest of their existence. The Velthari had no choice. Their fleet was gone. Their armies were scattered. Their homeworld was surrounded by 10,000 human warships. They accepted the terms. Kethvor was brought before the human fleet in chains. He walked past rows of human soldiers who stood in perfect silence, their eyes following him with cold hatred. He was placed in a shuttle that would take him to stand trial for genocide. Before he boarded, he turned to face Admiral Cole one last time. "You think this makes you strong?" he snarled. "You think showing mercy makes you better than us? You are no different from the Velthari. You are predators, just like we are. You simply hide it better." Cole met his gaze without flinching. His voice was quiet, but carried across the landing bay. "No, Kethvor, we are exactly what you made us. You came to Terra Nova and murdered our families. You burned our children alive and called it a lesson. You taught us that the galaxy respects only power, only strength, only the willingness to destroy. We learned that lesson well." He stepped closer to the chained Velthari commander. "But here is what you failed to understand. Humans do not become the monsters they fight. We destroy them. We tear down everything they built. And then, we build something better in its place. That is what makes us different from you. That is what makes us human." Kethvor was led away. The shuttle doors closed behind him. The galaxy watched as the greatest military leader the Velthari had ever produced was taken prisoner by a species they had dismissed as prey. In the halls of the Galactic Council, representatives from 200 species sat in stunned silence. They had seen something that day that changed everything they thought they knew about humanity. The humans had shown overwhelming power. They had shown perfect military precision. They had shown the ability to crush their enemies completely. And then they had shown something else, something that no other conquering species in galactic history had ever shown. They had shown restraint. Ambassador Lyrian of the Allori stood and spoke into the silence. "You see now what I tried to tell you 2 years ago. Humans are not prey. They are not insects. They are not a young species that can be bullied into submission. They are something the galaxy has never seen before." "What are they?" asked another representative quietly. Lyrian's ancient eyes were filled with something that might have been hope. "They are what we could have been," she said, "if we had ever been brave enough to choose justice over power." The war was over, the Velthari were broken, and humanity had emerged from the fires of Terra Nova as something new, something powerful, something that the galaxy would never underestimate again. But the hardest work was still to come. Building was always harder than destroying, and humanity had a lot of building to do. 5 years had passed since the war ended. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The old order, built on fear and power, was slowly giving way to something new. And at the center of that change stood humanity. The trial of Kethvor lasted 3 months. Witnesses from across the galaxy testified about the destruction of Terra Nova. Scientists explained how ashfall worked, how it burned atmosphere and turned living worlds to glass. Survivors from human ships that had arrived too late showed images of what remained. A dead planet, its surface black and lifeless, 2 billion people reduced to ash. Kethvor showed no remorse. He stood before the court with pride, defending his actions as necessary for Velthari security. He called humanity a plague that needed to be stopped before it spread further. He said he would do it again if given the chance. The court found him guilty of genocide. He was sentenced to spend the rest of his life on a prison planet. watching recordings of Terra Nova before the attack. Happy families, playing children, a living world full of hope. He would see what he destroyed every day until he died. The other Velthari commanders received similar sentences. The trials sent a message to the galaxy. There would be consequences for mass murder, no matter how powerful the murderer. But humanity did not stop there. Ambassador Elena Vasquez returned to the Galactic Council, not as a quiet observer, but as a full voting member. She had been offered the position 6 months after the war ended. The Council had learned its lesson about ignoring humanity. Her first act was to propose a complete restructuring of Council law. The old rules, which protected powerful species while ignoring crimes against weaker ones, were thrown out. New laws were written that applied equally to everyone. A new enforcement body was created, with ships and soldiers from dozens of species to ensure those laws were followed. The humans led this new force. They had proven they could fight. More importantly, they had proven they could win and then choose not to destroy. Other species trusted them to use power wisely. Not everyone welcomed the changes. Some of the older species complained that humanity was moving too fast, that they were disrupting traditions that had existed for millennia. A few even whispered about forming alliances to push back against human influence. Those whispers never went anywhere. The galaxy had seen what happened to the last species that threatened humanity. No one was eager to be second. On the 5th anniversary of Terra Nova's destruction, a ceremony was held at the memorial on Velthar Prime. The wall of black stone stretched for kilometers, 2,300,000,000 names, carved in letters small enough to fit, but large enough to read. Humans and aliens alike walked along the wall in silence, reading names and trying to imagine the lives they represented. Ambassador Vasquez stood before the memorial and addressed the gathered crowd. Representatives from over 100 species had come to pay their respects. Many of them had never cared about human lives before. Now they stood with tears on their strange faces, mourning people they had never met. 5 years ago, Vasquez began, this wall did not exist. 5 years ago, these names were living people with hopes and dreams. 5 years ago, the galaxy decided that their lives did not matter. She paused, looking out at the crowd. We built this memorial not for revenge. We built it so that no one would ever forget what happens when the powerful decide that some lives are worth less than others. We built it so that every species in the galaxy would know that genocide has consequences. We built it so that the people we lost would be remembered not as victims, but as the reason we became better. Lyrian of the Aelori stepped forward and placed a small crystal at the base of the wall. It glowed softly, a gift from her ancient people. On my world, she said, we have a saying, the dead live as long as they are remembered. Today, the entire galaxy remembers. Terra Nova will never be forgotten. After the ceremony, Vasquez and Lyrian walked together along the memorial wall. The old ambassador had become a friend to humanity over the years, one of the few aliens who had tried to warn the council about their mistake. You could have become monsters, Lyrian said quietly. After what the Velthari did, no one would have blamed you. You had every right to burn their world and call it justice. Vasquez stopped and looked at a section of names. An entire school, listed alphabetically. She touched the stone gently. My niece is on this wall, she said. Sophia. She was 7 years old. She wanted to be a starship captain when she grew up. She used to send me drawings of the ships she designed. Lyrian was silent, giving her space to speak. When I got the news about Terra Nova, all I could think about was revenge. I wanted the Velthari to suffer. I wanted them to know what it felt like to lose everything. I wanted to burn their worlds and listen to them scream. She turned to face the ancient alien. But Sophia did not die so I could become a monster. She died because monsters already existed. The only way to honor her memory was to make sure those monsters could never hurt anyone again. Not through more death, but through justice, through building something better. Lyrian nodded slowly. That is why the galaxy trusts you now. Not because you are powerful. Other species have been powerful. But because you have proven that justice and strength can walk hand in hand. That is why the galaxy trusts you now. Not because you won the war. Other species have won wars. The galaxy trusts you because when you had the chance to become exactly what you fought against, you chose differently. The two of them continued walking in silence. Around them, aliens and humans read names and shared stories about the dead. Enemies from the old days stood side by side, united by grief and hope. Far from Velthar Prime, on a small blue planet called Earth, Admiral Marcus Cole tended a garden. He had retired after the war, refusing every medal and promotion that the Federation tried to give him. He said he had done his duty, and now it was time for others to carry the burden. The garden was small, just a patch of land behind his house. But the flowers that grew there were special. They came from seeds recovered from Terra Nova in the months before the attack. Seeds that some scientist had stored on a ship, never knowing they would be the only survivors of an entire world. Cole spent his days caring for those flowers, watching them grow, remembering what they represented. Sometimes reporters came to ask him questions about the war. He always turned them away. The war was over. It was time to think about life, not death. One day, a young reporter refused to leave. She waited outside his gate for hours, until Cole finally agreed to speak with her. She asked him one question. How did he want humanity to be remembered? Cole thought about it for a long time. He looked at his flowers, at the purple blossoms that had once covered the fields of Terra Nova. He thought about the people who had planted them, the families who had walked among them, the children who had picked them and brought them home as gifts. We were hurt, he said finally. We bled. We burned. The galaxy expected us to either break or become the very thing that broke us, to surrender or to seek revenge without end. He knelt down and touched one of the flowers gently. We chose a third path. We became something new. Something that remembers the dead by protecting the living. Something that fights for justice without losing its soul. That is what I want humanity to be remembered for. Not the war, not the killing, the choice we made after. The reporter published his words across the galaxy. They spread from world to world, species to species. Humans who had never seen Terra Nova read them and felt proud. Aliens who had once feared humanity read them and felt hope. Years passed, decades, centuries. The galaxy continued to change. Old empires faded, new civilizations rose, wars were fought and ended, peace was broken and rebuilt. But some things remained constant. Humanity continued to stand for justice, even when it was hard. They continued to protect the weak, even when it cost them. They continued to remember Terra Nova, even when the last human who had lived there was long dead. And across the galaxy, a saying spread among the spacefaring species. It was spoken by travelers warning each other about dangerous routes, by parents teaching children about the galaxy's history, by soldiers whispering before battle, and diplomats negotiating treaties. The saying went like this: do not mistake human kindness for weakness. Do not mistake their patience for fear. Do not mistake their silence for surrender. They will offer you friendship freely and defend it without limit. They will give you every chance to choose peace, but never give them a reason to remember your name. For if you do, they will come for you, not with anger, not with hatred, with something far more terrifying. They will come with justice. On a small blue planet at the edge of the galaxy, flowers from a dead world continued to bloom. Children played in gardens where alien visitors came to pay respects. Monuments stood in quiet places, listing names that would never be forgotten. And humanity continued forward, shaped by tragedy, but not defined by it. They had been hurt, they had risen, they had chosen to become protectors instead of destroyers. It was not an easy path, it never would be, but it was the right one. The dead of Terra Nova, all 2,300,000,000 of them, had not died in vain. They had become the foundation of something new, something that the galaxy had never seen before and would never forget. A species that chose justice over vengeance. A species that remembered without hatred. A species that proved, against all odds, that the strongest thing in the universe is not the power to destroy. It is the courage to choose not to. And so the story ended, not with fire and blood, but with flowers growing in Terran soil, with children laughing in gardens of peace, with a galaxy slowly learning what humans had known all along. The dead do not want us to become monsters. They want us to become better. And that is exactly what humanity did.